Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. And today we will be looking at a very interesting topic that we haven't really yet spoken of here in this Hangout, which is the psychology of meaningless jobs. And by this we mean low-wage jobs, the so-called not desirable jobs that we tend to simply look at, for example, people that are usually in the considered low-level class people or poor people doing. But we have to start considering not only what does this mean at the level of the economy, but also how it affects the individual, and start really looking at what we are doing to each other by keeping us within such positions, and how it affects an individual's life and living standard overall. So for this, we have our guest, Kim Amourette, and she's from Belgium, but currently living in South Africa. Hi, Kim.
Hi everyone.
Okay, so for everyone watching, there's questions and answers available so that you can participate either with commenting about your own experiences on this situation, psychological effects that you have also noticed within you if you are in a similar position, or questions for Kim. And I would also remind you that there's a little bit of a lag, which means uh, there's going to be a little bit of silence in between her and I interacting. Okay, so Kim, let's begin with just tell us about your position as a cleaning lady in Belgium. What was your experience within this? How long were you at it? And essentially get us onto your life at that moment.
Okay, so when I was back in Belgium, I worked as a cleaning lady for a few years, um, while I was also studying um, for kinesiology. And basically, the reason why I did the cleaning lady job is because I didn't have at the time any other credentials in terms of being able to perform any other real job that I would enjoy. Meaning, for instance, I always wanted to be like a psychologist, um, but obviously you need a specific degree to do that, so I didn't have that. Even though I did try to get that degree, um, so I ended up just working as a cleaning lady because it was easy. Um, you know, yeah.
Okay, so tell us more about the aspect of the psychology behind this, which is something that we usually see as normal. No, like, oh, I have a really bad job and I drain myself. I've heard people recently just sharing how really it strains your entire physical body, for example, to be doing the same job all the time and just getting out of home, just sleeping for a few hours and maybe going to a second job. So how was it for you at an individual and psychological level to be doing this work, but maybe not also from the physical aspect, but the sociological aspect, so to speak? How would people treat you, see you, or how would you feel yourself in relation to having that cleaning job?
Okay, so well, I lived in Belgium, and working in Belgium as a cleaning lady wouldn't be like working in Belgium, working as a cleaning lady, for instance, in the US, or um, like countries, for instance, South Africa or Chile. Um, because in Belgium you have the whole support system, and they developed a system basically where they make sure that you do receive the money that you need to be able to provide for yourself. Even though, I mean, if you look at the amount of money that is, if I were to have a family to support, like if I was a single mom with a few children, I would not be able to actually take care of myself with that job, even though you would be working from 9 to 5 every day of the week. Um, so, I mean, in terms of my situation, um, I didn't have that much money to actually be able to afford a nice house. So I had a low-priced house, which had its consequences in that, for instance, there was very not so good insulation. So in the winter, it would be very difficult to keep myself warm, which can have consequences like, sickness. And I mean, I have the luck that how I was brought up was I was very well taken care of, so my physical body can handle things like those situations of like extreme cold in the winter. So, but there are many people who, for instance, would become ill in a situation like that, living in a house like that. So, yeah, that's one of the aspects of how my life was going at the time. And then I also tried to balance my education, which was like 1 day in the week, because if I would choose any other type of education that isn't like the alternative studies, because kinesiology is like the alternative route, if I'd go to university, then I would not have the time to actually perform any job because I'd need every day to study. So, I was working less to be able to go to that class 1 day of the week, which also means less money. Yeah. So
Yeah, exactly. We have also talked about this situation, for example, with people in, let's say, America, where the debt in terms of getting a college degree is so big that people have to be working sometimes even 40 hours a week. They don't have time to study, but they still have to attend their classes, and they work just as any other regular person. And this is kind of the situation where at a social and structural level, we are enslaving each other from the get-go, from that educational level, to simply not get any further because you are enslaved by that creation of debt, which is also why, for example, the provision of a living income guaranteed would be so beneficial for everyone, because this situation that you are precisely explaining, wherein you had that intention of studying, wasn't really fulfilled because of requiring money to live and having to endure this living standard that is certainly not what we would want for ourselves. It's not the best for everyone. So tell us about what would you see in terms of this type of jobs is consequential for our social structure in itself, like in terms of the quality of living, and not only for yourself, but what you can also observe from maybe now around the area that you live in, for example.
Okay, so the consequences that I'm seeing of our current system, where you need a job to be able to get money and survive, is that there's many of these. I mean, there is a limited amount of jobs because there's a limited amount of companies. And I mean, especially with like big companies taking over smaller companies within the whole monopoly structure that's going on in capitalism, also it's like jobs are getting less and less and less. So that means that we have to become creative with finding things to do to earn money. So you get situations, for instance, where here in South Africa, what I've seen is that there are people who get paid just to pack your groceries at the store. Obviously, this doesn't pay well. There are people who get paid just to watch your car. Like, they're called car guards, and basically what they do is they help you with backing up out of a parking spot, at the parking lot, which is like, in fact, a redundant kind of job, because, for instance, in Belgium, we don't have that because obviously it's not useful. You don't need that. Anyone can do that for themselves. We've all gone to school to drive a car. So, I mean, in terms of those kinds of jobs, and actually cleaning ladies as well in most situations, leaving out, for instance, situations where you have to take care of the elderly. There, the elderly need a cleaning lady because they can't do it for themselves. But generally speaking, people don't need cleaning ladies. So the consequences of people having to do these kind of jobs is that, it creates this sense within yourself of uselessness, because it's like, come on, the thing that you do every day, basically what you spend most of your life on doing, is absolutely purposeless, meaninglessness, and useless, in the greater sense. And somewhere in the back of your mind, in your awareness, so to speak, you know that, and you kind of are constantly confronted with that fact. So it creates a passive state within yourself where you don't really feel alive anymore. And that is, from my perspective, also why, for instance, it's easy for people to get sucked up by entertainment, and why people, for instance, when they come home after their job, they just want to be consumed by television or by, some feel-good popcorn movie, where they don't have to think, where they don't have to face life, where they don't have to do anything, because somehow we've come to accept this idea and feeling of uselessness within ourselves in relation to our own life and in relation to who we are in the greater sense of the world. I mean, and what I've also noticed is, when you look at, people like Bill Gates, people that have the opportunity, or people that for some reason and in some way are in those positions of having a job that fulfills them and that gives them meaning and purpose. I mean, these people, when you look at them and when you see them, they're not lazy. They don't waste time. They're active and they enjoy life and they educate themselves, and they basically take, everything out of themselves that they can, and they try to fulfill their utmost potential, because what they do day in and day out gives them meaning and gives their life meaning. So I mean, I think anyone can see that, if we're honest with ourselves, of how the job we perform actually does have a psychological effect on who we are within ourselves, and creates and adds to our self-image. And that is, that is, for instance, a reason why you can't just say about people like, oh, they're just stupid, or they're trailer trash, or they're just people who, they're just wasting their time, or they're just lazy, or just this or just that. Because if you have a look at what's actually at play, then who people become in their life and living is a consequence and a result of the economical system that they exist in and function within.
Exactly, I absolutely agree with all of that, and we will be looking further into this sociological aspect of it. We have a comment or question from Joanna. She's saying, in the workplace, it is easy to take the cleaning job for granted, and some basic care is not done by the individuals because we know that someone else is being paid to clean it for us. Kim, did you get offended or satisfied when people were doing or helping your job?
Um, what do you mean, Kim? Did you get offended or satisfied when people were doing or helping your job? What does that mean?
Meaning when people, for example, would do the cleaning themselves and they reduce kind of your workload, so to speak.
Oh, okay. Actually, yeah, I enjoyed it very much when I could work alongside people. I mean, an interesting thing that we've seen here at the farm as well is with one of the workers here, Lucy. She, um, at first, Maite was working with her in the garden, and she was enjoying herself and she was enjoying her job. But at a certain point, Maite um, stopped working with her, and she just told Boosie what to do. And then all of a sudden, Boosie became angry, and she was not liking her work anymore, and she was like cutting the edges. And we were like, "What's going on here?" And then we saw that basically it's because it's somehow gives a feeling that you're equal when when you're working together on something. Um, so yeah, from that perspective, um, the point of equality does give a value to people within themselves and to how you perform your job. You're having fun together doing things together. That's equality. It's realizing we are equal in what we do. I mean, even though we might be doing different things.
Yeah,
So
and
it's that point of equality that we're missing right now. Sorry.
yeah, exactly. And also, when it comes to really looking at this, this type of jobs, in essence, we know that many of them are not desirable. It's not something that we like or enjoy doing. But for example, cleaning, as Joanna was also mentioning, you can be a doctor, but if you don't have a well groomed and cleaned room to perform a surgery on, I mean, that will be kind of like placing in risk your entire profession. So we have to realize that we are actually interdependent and that there are things that have to be done, and that we have to, as a human being, stop placing these values upon what we do. And let's go on to also looking at how there's the low self-esteem that is generally created onto the people that are performing either these menial jobs or even what is very common now as beggars on the streets. I mean, in Mexico, it's the same situation as in South Africa. There's people and even young children that are packing your groceries, the parking lot guard person. But all of this also exists because of the insecurity that exists. So everything is intertwined. I mean, the moment that we don't have a society wherein we guarantee each other's living necessities, such as with a living income guaranteed, there's the need to steal in order to have money to be able to eat. There's children that are being sent by their parents to perform these jobs, either as a beggar or as a packer of your groceries in the supermarket, or any other job which I even worse, such as even child pornography. I mean, there are parents that have been able to survive because of selling this kind of material. We have to be very serious and realistic about the extent in which we are enslaving each other and debasing our human dignity with these jobs as well. So cleaning, in essence, is something that has to be done, and that we can also see that people would have a choice to do it or not, depending on what they want to do. I mean, some people really enjoy the fact of not having too much responsibility on their hands, and they would go for such kind of jobs. But some others simply say, well, I'd rather do something else and involve myself in something that is maybe requiring some type of knowledge or information. I mean, we have people that are able to consider that, but not as a coercion from the current system we're living in, wherein it is either you do take this job or you don't have anything to eat. And that's what a living income guarantee would also eradicate or simply delete from our psychological nature at the moment of survival. And also what you mentioned earlier is that the moment that we free ourselves from that constant survival mode, then we can certainly place ourselves into a more informed manner in terms of educating ourselves better, being more with children at home, and not so much in that constant fear of not having money, fear of losing the job, and so forth. Um, what would you say in terms of job creation in itself? Because let's face it, if we want people to have a dignified living, the amount of hours that are being worked at the moment is really sometimes unnecessary. And sometimes it's just for the sake of controlling people, keeping them at that low standard of living. So what are the solutions that you would see would be beneficial in this case?
Yeah, so as you said, I mean, when you have a look at the current um, work situation in our system, is that people need a 9 to 5 job um, to be able to, earn enough money to survive. So, I mean, all jobs are going to be occupied. So, I mean, we have to then create all these meaningless jobs that people then have to perform because there's not enough for everyone to survive. So, I mean, a more commonsensical solution would be, for instance, to simply give people a living income guaranteed who cannot find a job. I mean, rather than creating jobs or trying to create jobs out of thin air that don't even pay enough, for them to even be able to live off of it, why don't we just design a system that gives these people the money that they need, so that, I mean, the rest of us who like to do something, so that we can actually do what we like, you know, so that jobs become a form of self-expression where we are able to choose to perform the things that we're passionate about, rather than our job becoming a self-limitation and self-diminishment where we have to suppress our abilities and we have to suppress our dreams and passions just to be able to survive, because that is absurd. And a point within this that I'd also like to share in terms of what I've noticed about why this is, like, why is it that in our current economic system this self-diminishment exists in terms of having to work for money even though the jobs are meaningless, is that it's like a point of not giving it to each other, and so also not giving it to ourselves. It's like we don't want another to have something we don't, or we don't want another to be able to have that kind of money. I mean, as a point of spitefulness. It's like an emotional thing, you know, rather than just doing that which is common sense, doing that which is best for everyone. We go and listen to emotions, some kind of emotion of, you know, spitefulness, jealousy, whatever it is, which is, you know, stupid. It's really, really stupid. There's no other word for it.
Yeah, it's cool to also look at this from that human nature perspective, wherein our entire society is stratified and in an entire hierarchy that precisely holds these mental schemes in place. Like, I am more than you, I am worth more than you because you earn less than me, and you have to do this menial job, undesirable job for me, and that's your position, and that's who you will always be. Like, you are a slave, and you will remain so for the rest of your life. I mean, I fully agree with you in terms of what are we doing to each other with this mentality. I certainly, for example, from my experience, do not feel comfortable when I see little kids wanting to pack my groceries. I mean, it's like, why should you be doing this? You should be in school. You should be educating yourself to become a real person that can express themselves, as you were saying, getting a proper job and so forth. But no, they are stuck there, and sometimes they spend their entire lives within such positions. I mean, that is, once again, as usual in the system, we are shooting ourselves in our legs with doing to kids, for example, that, which is very common in Mexico, and you know, you don't see authorities or someone else taking care of that. It's become even normal to us to witness that. And so we have to start realizing, how are we enslaving each other with this kind of schemes of these jobs that, as you were saying, really many of them are pointless, and we can instead unleash our creativity, unleash our potential with supporting each other to get proper education and proper also activities, proper jobs, because it's not only like getting a lot of money, but really doing something meaningful for our society that is very required at the moment, such as mental support, for example, and psychological support. We have a comment from Joe Cook. He's saying, at the moment, I would say the majority of jobs exist not because they're creating value or goods that we actually want. Rather, we have jobs because we need to survive, and our jobs only exist as long as others are kept wanting what we sell. Very important aspect as well. What do you say, Kim?
Yeah, that's basically the point that we were discussing here, is that, you know, many of our jobs at the moment um, are redundant. You know, it's like, and we're not only limiting our abilities as an individual, at an individual level, but I mean, as a collective level, we could be and become so much more as human race. And what Joko is saying here is, like, we have jobs because we need to survive, and our jobs only exist as long as others are kept wanting what we sell. And this phrase are kept wanting what we sell is interesting, because I mean, where do our wants even come from? You know, why do we want the things we want? Because what is it what we want? We want luxury products, we want entertainment, The things we want is actually, in many cases, a result and a consequence of just wanting to find a way to preoccupy ourselves and distract ourselves and, escape in a feeling, an experience that doesn't have to do with our daily life. Like wanting to escape from reality and from dealing with reality. So I mean, I believe, and from my perspective, if we were to change our economy to rather support our individual abilities and skills and potential, that simultaneously, I mean, our wants would change. The things we want from each other, from life, would change, um, and would become more in terms of and in line with um, building and forming a society that and wherein each individual can discover their own potential and do things that are um, in line with their own potential, as opposed to and compared with what we now have, where our wants are completely crazy and out of proportion and are just, I mean, if you have a look at the various wants that are out there, really, it's abusive. It has a very abusive nature because we are consuming because we don't know what else to do with our time. That's just what it is. That's the sad truth of who we are right now.
Yeah, I see it, for example, with people in supermarkets that open 24 hours. And I have been very self-conscious about this aspect in my reality, especially third world country. You see abuse and this type of jobs everywhere and getting very low wages. But for example, the person that has to work there 24 hours is mostly because during the night, there's the most sales of alcohol, for example. And people want to get drunk because they cannot, you know, just go through that experience of working the entire week in this training job, and they, as we were mentioning, they just want to get free and have that at the same time. We just keep destroying ourselves instead of actually preventing even addictions, mental illnesses that are very prominent right now. I mean, all stress, all fears, even you know, deadly diseases at the moment are most likely created because we live in that constant survival mode, which we seek to escape. And those forms of escapism do not lead us to become a more informed or educated society either. We just perpetuate the same system. So that's why we're also doing this, to become aware of these aspects and start pondering within our own lives, how are we living in this world and what we are participating in, and what kind of jobs we also lead others to do. We have other comment from Joe, who's saying, very well put, Kim and Marlen. We have a system in which most live on survival, but their value is basically stolen and turned into labor for the luxury of people who have better jobs and thus can afford abusing others, which is what you were also mentioning, Kim. We have, thanks Joe for your comments. We have a question from Anna. She's saying, what is your perspective on seeing jobs as something that is supposed to fulfill a personal desire for achievement or development through a career, as the opposite of having a meaningless job?
Well, basically, that would be the ultimate aim of any um, any society that's best for the individuals living in it, is that jobs would become something purposeful and something that is in line with personal, desires, passions, something that you really want to do. And I mean, when I talk about desires, maybe many people would immediately think about, abusive stuff, or like the desire to sit around all day and do nothing. But actually, for instance, I had the desire to become a psychologist, to help other people, to interact, to be a building block within society, and to have a purpose in my life. So, I mean, having desires is not a bad thing. I think many people want to do something very meaningful with their life. And that if given the chance, we would become great. You know, so I mean, that is what Lake stands for, to build and develop a society where the things we do has meaning. Yeah, I hope that answered the question more or less.
Cool. I also can add that, for example, when it comes to jobs that can be automated, I mean, this is ongoing. We've talked about previously of technological unemployment, where people are left without any jobs because machines are taking over. I do agree with that aspect of if we can automate something and liberate that person to rather go and fulfill their own, as you were mentioning, desires or potential, that is for the best of our society. Because I don't really want to see, people in the train at 7 a.m. with a very sad and depressed state of mentality, because I know that they're going to be doing the same exact job for the next 8, 9, 10 hours and earning as little as 3.5 euros, for example, here for a minimum wage. I mean, that is not what I want to see as the people that I am surrounded by. I definitely dislike the experience of living in a system wherein we are coercing and pushing each other to just take that job because there is nothing else. So from that perspective, we do agree with that possibility of liberating our workforce, our potential to do something else more meaningful. For example, psychology, in essence, is something that is very required at the moment. A way to support each other to get from our mental stress that we are also causing due to the lack of support that we haven't given to each other in the form of giving, for example, the living income guaranteed, which is guaranteeing our human rights in essence. And we also, for example, if we look at keeping up with productivity, if we have people working less hours, let's say instead of 8 hours, working 4 hours, doubling that minimum wage to something dignified, which would be the double of the living income, that person would have more time to go home, for example, take care of their own living space, the cleaning, taking care of the children, and being more time with them, which in turn will strengthen the fabric of society, which is also the family nucleus, which at the moment is being compromised due to both parents mostly working 1, 2, sometimes even 3 jobs in order to sustain an entire family. As you were mentioning, Kim, for one person it might be sufficient, but to take care of an entire family is just impossible. So we're really destroying each other at the moment that we don't provide good wages, which the living income guarantee proposes, giving at least double the living income to those people that do work, and those that cannot find any job or that simply don't see themselves doing any job at the moment, they would get the living income guaranteed as a guaranteed human right. And that would certainly create all the effects that we are seeking to achieve with other means and the idea of progress through creating more jobs. But it's really not about that. It's really about liberating ourselves to stop being in that survival mode and then give ourselves the opportunity to, as you were saying, Kim, choose what we really want to employ ourselves, to use our potential, our creativity, and as such, change how we live as a society. So, any comments on this?
I was thinking of one, but I forgot. Sorry. So, no, for the moment.
Okay, cool. So we are about to end this hangout, and so anyone that wants to have a last comment, question, this is the time to place it. At the moment, I would just like to remind everyone to read what we are proposing as the Living Income Guaranteed proposal, which is the way in which we, through politics, through organizing ourselves, if you agree with everything that we've shared right now, what we want for our humanity, how we can change our human nature from survival to guaranteeing each other's living condition in a best for all manner, then join us, because this won't move if we don't gather upon one similar or the same path, which is guaranteeing our human rights, as simple as that. And that's what we've been doing with Living Income Guaranteed. So any last words, Kim, in terms of what you would like to say as of suggestion, solution, or maybe even a comment to people that are currently in this kind of jobs, similar to the one that you were doing in the past, and maybe some tips of how you were able to go through it, to not strain yourself or to not go into this inferiority, because that's also a way to support each other here.
Yeah, exactly. What assisted and supported me immensely to be able to actually realize that I still have potential is, in fact, having to walk a personal process of um, simply noticing myself, like becoming aware of the fact that who I am is not defined by, for instance, the money that I make or the job that I perform, even though everything in this world points towards the opposite. So I mean, I've had to really push myself to, for instance, still take up an education to educate myself through various means. And I mean, in my case, I was fortunate because I don't have any kids and I'm still young to actually be able to endure that kind of pressure and busyness and to still go out and do these things. So, I mean, what helped for me is to stabilize who I am within myself in terms of, developing a relationship with myself, essentially, like um, just ensuring that I remain stable inside of myself and that I no longer react emotionally to, for instance, the people I work with or for, that I don't become this emotional wreck or like an inferior being because of the job I'm performing or because of whatever structure there exists in society that I have defined myself within. So basically, you know, getting in touch with myself. And from there, I do, in a way, have the opportunity to become more and to contribute to developing a world that is better than the one that we're living in right now. So, for instance, within what I'm doing right now is, finding ways to help and support and assist and bring the message out there that we need to change.
Absolutely agree. A very important aspect, because we tend to then create that antagonism toward the perceived authority, the level that is above me, the elite, those that are hiring me, and that's how we perpetuate also this war in our society, wherein it exists within each one of us the moment that we start creating these emotions toward the job that we have to perform. So what you shared in terms of remaining stable as you're doing that job and not being defined by what you're doing, but simply realizing, okay, I have to survive at the moment. We haven't yet changed the system, so I do require this money. I then do what I'm doing. I simply breathe through it, walk it, get it done, and then at the same time, as you're saying, on a parallel mode, be this point of support for others, of realizing that we have to change the problem from the core. We cannot really continue this way. And so kind of enlightening each other to become aware of this as well. We have a question for you from Joanna. She's saying, in Portugal, you find engineers and doctors from Eastern Europe working as cleaners because they didn't find a job and or because of the language barrier. While the cleaning job can be seen as an intermediate solution, aren't we losing brains? What's your perspective?
Yeah, well, that's exactly the point that we're facing right now, is that we're losing potential. We're losing potential of everyone in our society simply because of how our job market is structured. So yes, we are losing brains, we're losing everything, because we're just not willing to consider designing a system that is supportive for everyone. And because these people have to resort to doing these things just to survive. So it's a good question, Joanna. Thanks.
Yeah, I also agree. And we also read some news some time ago of a person from Spain that had like 3 degrees, and he ended up doing some cleaning job in the UK. And this goes hand in hand with an overall crisis wherein people are either underemployed or simply cannot find any job because, you know, there is no jobs, and we are keeping people within the idea that you have to educate yourself and get to the most degrees, but you go out there and either can't find a job or get very low paid for what you have studied as well. So there's a lot of structural problems there that have to begin with this idea that we don't have to submit everyone to the idea of you have to get a job in order to make a living. If we can guarantee this as a human right, that people that certainly cannot find a job get that money to live, then maybe even the real economy will be supported once that we start giving money as a way to support each other and to maybe create new professions, new activities, new occupations for ourselves that currently aren't even relevant because of that survival mode, and that the industries that are certainly mostly at times garbage production for capitalist purposes. So we can change what we consume, we can change how we entertain ourselves, how we educate ourselves, and how we relate to each other, not from this inferior, superior mentality, but realizing, hey, I live in a society wherein we are supporting each other to live as in a more dignified manner. So that's what we can focus on from here on. So yes, we cannot afford to lose more brains in this situation and our potential. Thanks, Joanna, for your question as well. So thanks a lot, Kim, for this time and sharing your personal experiences. We will also look forward to sharing more about these kind of stories with everyone, because understanding the economy is not about numbers and mechanisms, but also how we are participating in it, how it affects our own lives, our own minds, and so realize that we have to change, and that change also begins with ourselves. Thanks, Kim.
My pleasure. Bye.
And thank you to everyone watching. We'll see each other on the next Hangout next Sunday at the same time. Thanks for watching. Bye.